This show is sponsored by The Comics Shop. We hope you enjoy the show.
And g'day, I'm Lee Chalker, creator of Battle for Bustle, and tonight is a very special episode of Tuesday Chinwag. It is the, I guess, the episode 17 Christmas special. So this evening, there's two guests, luckily enough, two of the legend of the Australian comic books. So, looking very forward to this. We've got Mr. Dave DeVries up there, and below down there we have the Prince of Darkness of Australian comics, the man that's gone by many names, but for this evening we will call you Beau Jardine. How are you, mate?
Good. I'm quite partial to Dark Lord as well.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a thing in front of you that I can't see you. This meeting is being recorded by a host or a participant.
Yeah, just say okay. Got it.
There's not an okay. Oh, there it is. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Gee, that
Excellent.
was like.
Excellent. So just so everyone at home and you guys know, the show's basically just a show about the chinwag and 6 prompting questions, phrases: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Everything that happens, you guys control the direction of the conversation, and I just sit back here and listen to the lovely anecdotes and enjoy the fun and the good times, and it's Christmas and everyone's happy. So, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you just straight out, always like to start with who.
Hi, I'm Beau, and I've been involved in comics for about 35 years. And I know I look so young, I know. And I met Dave as one of the first people I met, and realised there were a few of us. There was the start of the Ugle Club. What happened is I met Frank McConaughey and Steve Carter in Land Beyond Beyond, a comic book shop on George Street. And I had artwork with me. I had a folder and I showed them the stuff, and they invited me to Frank's place to talk about this new venture. Fantastic. They've got the money for it, and they're going to do a horror comic. And it started off as Oz Comics, but anyhow, when Steve got control of it, it became fantastic. And we were working on that, and I think we'd done about 2 issues of that when the big Comic Con happened. The Richard Ray Opera House, Stan Lee wasn't there, Comic Con. And then I met Dave, and because they were on panels and stuff, and I was in the audience. But I first met Dave at Steve's place. I'd been there once before just to talk to Steve and Des and Frank about the magazine and what they wanted. And, Steve was pretty dogmatic. He knew what he wanted exactly. Schlock horror. He didn't want psychological horror. No way. He wouldn't let me use the word Tinkerbell in a title once. It got turned into Night Flight because the Tinkerbell syndrome. Anyhow,
so you two have known each other a long time, because you both talk very fondly of each other and stuff. I could imagine you both quite like a beer or two or a wine, so you must have had some good laughs over the years.
Yeah. When I first walked in, Dave was sitting at a chair, and he was drawing a picture that had biplanes on it, like the Red Baron, like biplanes. Mm-hmm. And it was, so I immediately want to see the picture. And Dave moved his arm like a kid in school protecting his food, like someone does in prison, so that I couldn't really see the picture. And I just thought, oh, shit, because I didn't know anything. None of us really knew what we were doing in those days. We just wanted to do it and thought that we could, and we were big fans of everyone else,
Yeah.
And then almost straight away, fantastic. Finished after 4 issues. It was meant to go further than 4 issues, but, events ensued. Cyclone started, the Southern Squadron started, and I did my first Night Side in the Rock, which was the first comic that I'd ever done. And it was the first indie comic as far as I know. And it's, oh, sorry, that happens every 5 minutes.
It just adds to the atmosphere, mate. I love it.
Yeah, get used to it. It's deja vu, you know.
Oh,
Yeah. Anyhow, and so I was off after Nightside on the Rock, and I'm really, really ashamed of those 3 comics now. I'm really ashamed of them. They're just
Why?
not as good as. Nightside on the Rock got their powers off a fairy in the desert for no reason at all. They immediately were cops for no reason at all. You know, the baddie shows up. It's a girl who's got control over machines, but she's out of control. She builds a big robot to fight Nightside. Nightside grows up big, but is a bit scared of the robot, needs the Rock's fighting powers. So he's about that big, and she squashes him into her stomach. And now he takes control of the giant body and fights the robot that puts Luna Park's face on. So
mate, how old were you when you were doing this?
28, I think. Yeah, I should have known better. I'm just ashamed of it. It's ridiculous, you know. And but that's because that was the best I could do at the time, you know. And I've had years since then, years. And so what I'm doing now, I'm really proud of. You know, I'm finally giving them a redemption. And Nightside gets a second type of origin, which is way better than the fairy in the desert, you know? Yeah, the big monster thing that they fight turns out to be Forge, who's a little girl, who's a 14-year-old girl, and she joins them straight away. Just join. And when they ask about her power, guess what? She got it from a fairy in the desert. It's a terrible origin. It's the worst.
But mate, remembered very fondly. I, am aware it was a big seller back in the day. For what were you doing? Like, was it you'd walk down the street, hand copies out, and sell them, or was that like at the start of the whole get into news agents? Or
they were in the news agents. They were in every news agents, and then and we didn't realise how good the news agents were to us. Yeah, that it was a gold mine, and they were in the news agents and went out everywhere. So the second one I got to double the size. Well, not double, but I had another 8 pages, and the third one was double sized. And so I charged $1 more, and that sold 44%. So that was excellent. That nobody's come close to that. And I got a T-shirt that said "Mr. 44% bought to the Eagle Club."
Have you got a photo of that anywhere? You can always live with that now.
No, none of us had cameras back then. None of us had a camera. I remember I went to a Halloween party at Chris Sequeira's place, and everybody really dressed up. Like really, the makeup and the monsters and stuff. And no one got a photo of it. Not one photo exists of that night. You know.
Now, were you in your Dark Lord guise at that particular point of partying, mate? You know, because you would have been able to slip into those like sort of establishments.
I played the part of an exorcist, and I grew my whole full beard and then shaved it down to here, so it was like biblical. And I had a hammer and stake and crosses and stuff, so I would have got in every photo if there were photos. But there weren't photos. Okay. Yeah, anyhow, it was a thing, you know. I had my first fangs made when I was 15, and it was the second time I ever got paid. I was 15 years old. I got photos of them, and I had to have them shaved down after a couple of weeks so I could speak. If your fangs are too big, you hiss and you
kept biting your lip, did you?
Yeah, and so I've been doing that for years. It's kind of a performance piece, The Vampire. Yep. And then I stopped for a long time because I had a son and I had to walk him to school, and I was eventually teaching art at that school. And so I had to, like, you know what I mean, dial it all down again. Yeah. But he's now 23 and becoming a lawyer soon, so I can wear what I fucking like.
Oh, well, no one should tell you any different anyway, mate.
And it's fun. You know, little kids either are horrified of me or they want to talk to me, and I tell stories, little kids. We're waiting in line to get a picture of Santa the other day, and there were little kids there. And they, you know, one said, you know, I love it when they ask their mum, is he a monster? Because, I like them to know there's monsters. There are monsters in the world. They just don't look like this, you know. Anyhow, and so I sat and talked to these 2 little kids, his brother and his sister. I told them about the war in heaven. You know.
How did that go down? Were they enthralled?
Oh, yeah, they look at you. Yeah. It's the bit where Lucifer sort of falls from grace, and he and a third of the heavenly hosts are kicked out of heaven. And I tell them, no, they walked out in disgust. They were sick of the operation system there. Anyhow, I like
They didn't have a union, mate. There's nothing they could do.
Yeah, and Lucifer never got a book. All we know is in that other book. You know, that's not fair. That's not fair. Yeah, there's so much wrong with it. God, it's
you had Fantastic, and you know, Nightside and The Rock and stuff. At what point did you like you had another two, like Southern Squadron, which everyone, if you're watching, there's a Kickstarter for Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula at the moment.
This is true.
Follow the Facebook, Southern Squadron Facebook, Dark Nebula Facebook, Kickstarter, Reverie Publications Facebook, and join up to that campaign. So that includes Dave DeVries, Tad P, Shane Foley, and Southern Squadron Dark, which is done by Bo Jardine. So, mate, you had Southern Squadron back in the day, and then you came into, with Jason Paulos, you had Hairbutt the Hippo, because my first encounter with you was Hairbutt the Hippo #1. And I'm sort of getting to this because at that stage in those credits, you were called Beaumont America. Is that correct?
Bodine America.
That's it. Now, mate, what's with the different monikers over time and stuff, you know? What was that about? Just different characters that you formatted to...
My father's a criminal, and he was in prison, and he's in there for being a pedophile, and he's been caught lots of times. Anyhow, he was in prison, and when I turned 18, I started getting mail from him and from the prison. And the only way I thought I could do that is change it. So I changed my name legally to Bowie Alucard.
Yeah.
Alucard is Dracula backwards.
Yeah.
You know. And then thought that was stupid a bit later. And when I started with comics, I changed to Bodine Lockheed Chaitanya Manson America. the signature took up a whole page. You know?
I was going to say a whole bottom of the page.
The whole ego of it, you know. And I was hoping that they would remember a name like Bodine America. And because I didn't want to use the word America, I spelled it with a K and a H on the end. That's the way the Klan spells it. So
there you go. You snuck that in.
Yeah. So then I thought I need a more normal name. So it was, I don't know, about 15 years ago, I changed it to Beaumont Jardine.
Yep.
Which, you know, Beaumont means beautiful mountain and Jardine means beautiful garden. Yeah.
There you go. All adds up to beautiful man, doesn't it, mate?
And it's Beaumont Athanasius Raphael Jardine. Athanasius, the first Athanasius, he's the first person to be murdered by an angel, and Raphael's the angel that did it. So I've got the two of the, but I just write Bo Jardine now, you know.
Yeah, that's probably easier for people to remember.
Hairbutt was the most regrettable decision that I ever made, because I'd finished with Nightside and The Rock, and I was starting on Stranger Danger, which was a werewolf love story, and I'd finished the first issue, and I had a chapter in there drawn by Glenn Lumsden, and a chapter drawn by Jason Paulos, and then Jason asked me, could I write Hairbutt for him? And all he had was pictures of these characters. And I said, of course. And did it on the spot. Very, very, very easy.
Yeah.
And these sort of characters, and we pathos them off against each other. And I wanted it to be sort of cringy, sad humor, you know, and he liked it. And we didn't know if it was going to work or not. And we did that for, about 15 years. Yeah, we did really well. But I wasn't drawing, and I wasn't working on my own stuff. And Hairbutt isn't my own stuff. Yep. It isn't. They're his characters, you know. Yep. And I should have done the werewolf. The werewolf, it was meant to be 3 issues of a werewolf story called A Stranger Danger. Yep. But there was bad luck too, because there was this initiative by the government that came out about pedophiles and little kids called Stranger Danger. Mm-hmm. And bummer, I can't call the comic that now. At first it was going to be called The Chippendale Wolf, because the werewolf lived in Chippendale in the city. It'd pull you down through manholes, you know, like a trapdoor spider in Chippendale. And it was Steve that says, don't call it that, because people will think he's a stripper. The Chippendales.
Called that though, Bo, in Fantastic. I'm sure you had
Yeah,
a ship.
I know, but Steve said don't call. Yeah, but that was the first time I did that werewolf, and I always have wanted to do this werewolf. I've got a great story about a werewolf, but but then Hairbutt, like, that went for years, and eventually I fell off the wagon and ended up sort of homeless and at loose ends, and I lost a lot of that stuff. That werewolf comic, I've got about 6 pages of that, and every page is rotted. Every page has holes in it and stuff. I just lost a lot of stuff, but that
Your
happens.
camera's slipping, Bo. You start. There you go.
There you go. In your suit. Yeah, you want to see that big S there on your chest,
There we
mate.
go.
It's sitting on my sunglasses.
Yeah, slide down the angle. Hey, dude, with on your Facebook pages and stuff, Bo, because you've got, like, I guess back in the day, you're a bit of a definitely out there promoting your work, because there's like TV clips that you've put on your Facebook page of different stuff too, like
because we met these people at a convention and they kept inviting me and Jason to come on a kids show and talk about stuff when we've got something to talk about. So you'd ring them and they'd go, yes, come on straight away. And there was about 8 of them I never got recordings of. There were some really good ones, but and I just remember my hair was that long.
Yeah,
I can't. I haven't had my hair cut in years. This is as long as it grows. But back then I could sit on it. I ended up hating the conventions, but they're just conversations that don't get you anywhere, that you don't learn anything from. And I like to learn something, even if it's only something about the other person. You want to learn something, but we had the just vacuous conversations. And, the people I knew who were doing comics, it wasn't like that with them, but the public was, and sometimes they could be like quite rude. They more or less saying, why can't you do better? And you just want to deck them and say, get up, why can't you? I'd get really angry at some of the people, and I haven't been to a convention in years, and I don't want to. They were, some horrific things happened at conventions. Anyhow, I'll get back to the story. So it looked like when we were doing Fantastic and I did Nights, and there was only about 6 or 7 comics that I knew of that were Australian, and I figured there was about 10 people in Sydney and about 10 people in Melbourne, and then I went away from the scene for a really long time, and I had to do more research into Sydney's blossoming heroin trade. I had to, and when I got back, now there's hundreds of them. There are thousands of comics. And I thought, how did this happen? How did, there's probably a lot of people who'll tell me, but so many people doing comics. And then I got an iPad and I worked it all out. It's pretty easy to draw a comic nowadays if you've got the right tech. You still need a story. You still need a hook, and a lot of the comics I just don't think are very good. And, give them time, I guess, benefit of the doubt and stuff, but a lot of them I just haven't seen a good one, Well, Gary, of course, Gary Challoner, his stuff's amazing. There's some really great artists, but I just haven't seen a great Australian comic yet for a while. I think they're about to hit us.
It seems like a bit of a thriving community out there.
We're the best. Nobody's doing superheroes properly, and we're the best to do them, so we should be doing superheroes.
So when did I want to get to this, because I like the concept of it. It's a little off topic, but Southern Squadron Dark. Well, I've got the two of you here, and the Southern Squadron.
That started because
Boss and you with this crazy idea of Dark. How did that?
No, that was just because of lockup. Can you show any stuff, Dave?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we were just talking. And Dave was saying, he said it for a few weeks in a row that he'd like to start again with the characters, with the Southern, and I figured I'd do a monster version of each of them. That's probably it. That's probably the first one I did. I know it's the first Jackaroo that I did.
Has that come up on the screen all right?
Yes, it has, mate. Perfect.
Yeah. So I just thought I'd do monster versions of his characters. And then I thought, why wouldn't I give them 3 pages each? And that ballooned out to 48 pages. And actually, when then I'd finished all the pin-ups, I'd done 60. So, but it was because I thought I wasn't going to do this ever again. I'd drawn one picture in 4 years of a dead rat. Honest to God, when one of the rats died, I drew it, and that's the only picture I've done in 4 years. But no, I'm working every night now, and I'm enjoying it.
So Southern Squadron Dark, that was like your first, I guess, comeback after a period of time, was it, mate?
Yeah,
Like
I did. Yeah, in the space, I wasn't doing comics. I did Smack Freak and Pothead, but they were different. They didn't come out the news stations.
Well, that's something
yeah.
we'll come back to, bud, because that whole little segue there of your life is very, very interesting with those two comic books. But like, and you just
anyhow, yeah, but the start of this one was, you know, I just wanted to do Dave's characters my way and do it like a Western, you know, and then fit everybody else's characters in. There's a couple I regret I couldn't get in, but Darwin Dill I should have been able to get in somewhere. But then I got in everybody else. I got in Hairbutton, Airhawk, Captain Good Vibes, you know, Seymour I from the Torn people. I got a lot of people to have little sort of cameos in it. That's the front cover early in the morning. Yeah, and the whole story takes about an hour and 15 minutes. And then everyone dies at the end. Look at that. That's quite a good one of the Dingo. Yeah.
Mate, that's beautiful artwork. And you're looking at that. You're obviously, from what I've seen, your artwork in the past and stuff and new, you handwrite all your lettering, yeah? You haven't...
Oh, not anymore. I've been over this with Dave. I wanted to handwrite it, even though it would send me blind. And it was the most difficult part of it because I wanted there to be a voice, a proper voice. And I didn't like the computer stuff. The computer stuff they've got now is amazing. And Dave is lettering my stuff, and it looks way cleaner and way easier to read once it's done that way. And he just surprised me the other night because I had big, ugly musical notes in there drawn in for when it's a song, and he can put actual, real, beautiful, fine music, written music. So, so now I like the computer lettering. And in the stuff that's coming up, I want Forge to have a robotic font, and that'll help, you know. And she turns human, she still has the robotic font. And I want Nightside's font to sometimes go, you know, heavy metal, you know, go demoniac. It's the new stuff's been fun. It's
right. So
this started just from a conversation in lockdown on Google Club.
Yeah. Well, with
here's an example of some of the work where it's been where we've actually got the relettering. So you can see that some of it has retained its original style.
Yep.
And some of it's got the I guess the more traditional style lettering.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful, man. Oh, dude, how long does it take you, honestly, Bo, to do those bloody like cathedral-esque type? Where's he got? He's got to get a drink. How long does it take you to draw one of those like cathedral type things, mate?
Oh, it always depends. Sometimes it's really easy and I can power through it, and sometimes it takes days. And then I just walk around looking at a half-finished thing and fretting about it. It's pathetic, just pathetic. Sometimes I get stopped and I just don't know what to do next. And but it takes this one here. This is an ad which Dave's coloured this one. This one took a long time. I drew her and I drew him about a week later, and all this stuff at the side, like it's meant to look like a tattoo, you know. Took this one probably took about 3 weeks altogether. Yeah. Sometimes they take forever, and sometimes I get a whole lot done at once. You know, I don't know what the equation is. Sometimes I just can't do it. I just sit there looking through the pages and just staring at it, and I'm just the very soul of patheticness, you know. There it is, finished.
There it is.
It's an ad, and they've both got to look normal, but they're superheroes. They should look, you know, like the way he is. You can see him wearing the outfit, you know. When I first drew that, he was wearing the outfit, and then drew Fonzie over the top of him. You can tell that, you know, only superheroes stand like that. That they're meant to look like fake fashion models from Dolly magazine.
No, that looks awesome, man. It looks actually, while I've got you here, Bo, I do have to say, mate, that hang on. I have one of your pieces
Oh, really?
That's where I went back and researched old Bo.
Oh, the
because-
eyes. Yep. It's just the set of eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That took a week. That's
Did it?
spray. Yeah, it's spray can on it.
Unreal.
Yeah. I sprayed into the air and just let the drops fall on it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was the first time I thought like Bo Jardine, and then went back like long time ago, because that was where you and I first touched base, I guess, because that was a variant cover for Battle for Bustle issue 1. So
Yes.
yeah, and no, that's pride of place, mate, next to the
Cool.
drawing board, man. So it's
It's
there.
nice
So
to
you're
see it.
here in
It's nice
spirit,
to
bud.
see- Yeah. It's nice
Yeah.
to see it in a frame. That's
Yeah.
lovely.
Oh well, mate. I a special piece, mate. You know. So it's
Yeah.
yeah. Weird bond, mate, because you're the only other person that's ever had published art that's not by me for Battle for Bustle. So you're in. You're in my club, mate.
It was a shock to be asked. You know, I thought there'd be 100 people who'd asked before me, but yeah, I'll tell you about Smack Freak because it's
Let's
important.
go to these books, mate. What brought you to this?
I was really, really lost, and my little boy had just been born, and I was staying at grandma's place for like the first few weeks while he's just little and we're learning everything. And I had lots of time to myself, and I realised that a lot of what happened with heroin I was going to forget, and sometimes that's a huge blessing, you know. Anyhow, I started writing it down, and then I don't know how it started becoming a comic, but at first it was just something to do, and I didn't think anybody was going to see it. But then by the time I was about 10 pages in, I say, hey, this could help. This could help. And so I told the grittiest of stories I could without going overboard. I had to take 8 pages out just for propriety's sake. You know, children could read this. Yeah. So I had to take out some of the crime stuff. But I just explained where I was and how it sort of hit me that heroin's the problem and I have to stop. And it's a fear like you've never known. It's the fear of the unknown, but fear of everything. It's just you're terrified. And I thought, okay, well, I can address that. So I wrote the story for junkies, more or less trying to tell them, look, I was in as deep as you and I know the fear. I know it. And sort of try to guilt trip them into getting help. And if they don't want to think about the people around them, their partners and their parents and their kids and their families and the people who they love and how they're hurting everybody. And I sort of guilt trip them into it. And then the story ends, and then there's 8 help pages with phone numbers. They're useless now. It's 30 years ago. Yep. But so I did the whole thing, and I thought nobody was ever going to see it. You can't sell it on the newsstands, thing like this. It doesn't have a superhero in it with big boots, you know. And I didn't really know what to do with it. And the fates decreed that I met this guy called Max at the pub at Brooklyn. And I went to the pub all the time, and he was from out of town. And I'd been across the road photocopying stuff. And he said, what else have you got, anything to show me? And I says, yes, I've got this useless thing that no one's ever going to be interested in. And he gave me the money to get it printed. And so we printed up 10,000 issues, and I could give them away. There wasn't a cover price. Yeah. So everybody in the street had a Wolverine T-shirt, got a free comic. But they went to halfway houses and detox centres and the prisons and places like that. And it was the best mail I've ever received in my life. I got great letters. I got tear-stained ones that were 18 pages long. From Long Bay Prison, I got one that was 1 envelope, 1 stamp, but it had 10 letters in it from 10 different people, all in the one. You know, I got great letters. And there was 2 women who I kept in contact with, God, for years, for like 10 years or something. And both of them say that it was the comic that stopped their sons using. And I don't agree with it. I say that it's a bigger thing than a comic book. They'd have to sort of, make a lot of decisions themselves. Yeah. But if the comic book helped to blackmail them into feeling like that, then I'm happy. You know, I've always considered it the best thing I ever did. And I got to use all my skills, but not just to tell a dramatic story, to tell a true dramatic story and try and help. just
So
try
that's the piece of work that you reckon, like you bared all of your soul and put
Yeah,
everything into those pages, mate.
it's just about me. It's how I came off heroin.
Yeah.
It's exactly what happened. And I wanted to come off heroin for years, but I was living under the ground, I was living under Central Station. It was all very disgusting. But a good story, so I wrote it all down. And then and it just did really well. I didn't sell any of them, so it didn't do well in that way. And then a few years later, I did Pothead, and Pothead never came out. But that was about stories about marijuana from other people. It wasn't about me at all. But it was all true stories except for the last one. And the last one's about a guy called The Days Without. And days, D-A-Z-E, the days without marijuana. So it's about a guy who stopped smoking marijuana, and it's his 30 days. And I stopped smoking marijuana that night. So it was my 30 days as well to make it real, Yeah. And that's coming out bits and pieces now. It's coming out a chapter at a time. In what's it called?
I'm pretty sure, mate, that the first half part of Pothead was out was it Vex?
Yes, he's done
issue 1 or something. That's through Reverie Comics. If anyone's looking for some of Beau's art, that's a comic book that's got this story in it, Pothead.
So it's great to see it come out. He's going to do a chapter each one for a little while. And there's 6 chapters, I think, 5 or 6 chapters. 5 chapters. But that was the same kind of thing. It's trying to help. I don't have anything against marijuana or people smoking marijuana, but I have seen some people go absolutely nuts, absolutely barking mad. And so that's the horror. That's the horror story. And so I wrote about other people, and at least it's coming out in bit form. But Smack Freak, I've always going to consider the best thing I've ever done. You should read it sometime, Dave. Dave's not read it. This is how close you're talking about the bond that we have,
mate. Hey, I think that comic book is out on one. You released the whole thing on one of your Facebook page, didn't you?
Yes.
That's for anyone that's out there. Go to Beau's Facebook page, follow, subscribe, do your thing, but read this comic book because I've read it.
And the help pages are out of date.
Yeah.
They're useless now. It was so long ago, but that's the Smack Freak comic.
Yeah, but mate, you say it's not many people can say their comic book saved lives, mate. So
I don't know really, honestly, absolutely that it did. But I think
you know what, Beau? We're gonna say it did.
Yeah. I know.
We're gonna roll with the story, man. And if it didn't, but hey, we think right here now it did. It saved yours, mate. So there's the life. So that's all that matters, mate. When you got to, so you said that was like your boom, you won your soul at that particular time. Then you sort of went into a hiatus, came back with Southern Squadron Dark. But of late, you've been showing some artwork of Nightside and stuff like that on your Facebook pages.
I'm doing 6 issues of Nightside coming back from the dead.
Yeah. Now you.
And the rocks there. There we go.
There you go.
And it's about paparazzi. It's about dark fame, and she believes that she's the most famous person on earth. So if she can stay the most famous person on earth, she can live forever. And everyone thinks that, people, that's the philosophy, but it turns out to be way different at the end. People want her to be a superhero, but she's not. She's a demon from hell. In the last comic of Nightside on the Rock 30 years ago, she raped demons to death in hell. She's not a good girl,
She's a tough lady. But look at that artwork, mate. You're from me, I love black and white artwork, man. You know that. But that's you're really firing there, man. I've got to say.
I am failing sometimes. I do throw stuff away, which I just have ruined. That's a good example of when the inks went well. It looked great in pencil, but I really didn't know that. And I hate drawing those fucking cities. They're so hard. They are so hard, you know.
So what sort of inks were those, mate? Do you use pen? Do you use Indian ink brush? Like, what's your favourite?
Artline 0.4
Yep.
and Sharpie extra fine.
Yeah.
They're all here. You know,
Yep.
Artline 90s, just the very cheapest stuff that you can get. You know, I don't have any special stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one where the inking worked. You know, it was. Yeah, she's meant to just look horrific to look at. She scintillates, she sparkles, and she's meant to be sort of, you know, like Roger Rabbit or something. You know, she's just meant to look, you know, startling. And if I had room, I'd have people actually die seeing her. You know, I've got this scene. I can't fit it in, but all these people are waiting to cross the road, and it's don't walk or walk, and it's right in the middle of Sydney in front of the town hall. And if I figured if one of those people turned in all black into a superhero and flew off, people could die. It would, you know, we're used to seeing it on television, but to see it in real life, and I'd love to do. Yeah, there's driving into the city. That's meant to be Paddington. Yeah, and at first it was going to be a straight origin where she comes back out of the campfire and, you know, she's all blobby and grows a body and stuff. And I rewrote the whole thing, so that happens in the 3rd issue now. And in the 1st issue, you just see her like that. You see billboards of her, and you see her in the distance. And I, you know, I'm going to build up the suspense. Do you know what I mean? It's a long time before you hear her talk. And then, you know, and she's friends with the other superheroes and talks with them just like they're friends, but they're shit scared of her. They are really, really terrified of her. Yeah, and so yeah, I'm building up to that. And I've got a big punchline ending. I'm going to lead everybody up the garden path with about 8 red herrings, you know, so everyone thinks they know what's going to happen, and then something else happens. Yeah.
So with that, and Dave's doing the colouring and stuff, when are you thinking about this touching down, mate?
I've no idea. I've really just got to do nothing but finish it. Yeah. Finish the 6 issues, nothing, and I don't worry about money or how I'm going to get rid of it. I'm sorry, I've still got your picture to do. I know it. I haven't been able to get to it because I've also said no to Gary Challoner. I've also said no to somebody else who wanted the Airhawk thing. They offered me the cover of Airhawk, and Sizzle offered me something, and I've just got to, you know, power through and get it finished and then get to the other stuff. But I'm so scared it will be a false start. You know what I mean? If I
Mate, it sounds like you've got plenty of momentum at the moment.
Oh, it's fun. As long as it's fun, I get a lot of stuff done, you know?
Yeah.
This one's quite good. I had to have 2 characters sitting at a diner and looking straight into each other's eyes. And then I had to do it again. That's quite nice, isn't it? Can you see
Lovely. It? I can see that. Yeah, absolutely.
She gives her headdress thing to him, and he goes, "Oh, I don't know. I didn't even know that came off." And he puts it on, and then she can, you know, he can use it as a flash drive and see one of her memories. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, they're going well. I like the robot girl. She's fun to draw. She's got lots and lots of details.
So we got Southern Squadron Dark through Reverie and the Kickstarter with Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula, which is out now. That's your next book that's available to the public, isn't it, Bo? Like, that's the one that's out there now for people to get a copy of and go to the Kickstarter.
Then there's the second one of Last Hurrah, and then I don't know when I've got anything after that at all. I've just got to finish this and see what happens, and maybe I'll win the lottery. But if I've got to wait on other people, there's a 2-year lag. You know, once it's finished, I've still got 2 years to wait till it comes out. You know, if you have money, it's different. I just don't have the money to do it. You know.
Yeah.
But it's not the point, is it? The point is to have something to do every night. You know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the lovely thing about art, mate. Is it's always been with you, I guess. You know. So it's that.
Like you're doing it for other people, and you want other people to like it. So they've got to be able to see it. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise, it just piles up here, and it's just a bit mental. I saw this show about the dark side of comedy a couple of weeks ago, and there's people who say that if you want to be an artist as a life choice and you're an artist before you're anything else, that's a type of mental illness.
You know, I often think, man, there must be something wrong with me down here by myself in the granny flat with the dogs, like doing these drawings, you know what I mean? Like, and thinking, oh, yeah, and like, oh, this is cool. I'm really having fun with this. And like the rest of the world is just going about their business. And I do think to myself, like, what am I doing?
And if you're writing it as well as drawing it, sometimes you come up with these great ideas along the way. Gags and things to put in, and that's then you can just put it in. You don't have to ring anybody and convince them, you know. Yeah, at one stage she's got to kill a vampire, and so she's got to have a hammer and stakes to kill the vampire. And I thought, why not? Can't it look like Thor's hammer? You know, there were hammers that looked like that before Thor, you know. So she's got a thing that looks very much like Thor's hammer, and that's just a gag, you know.
Yeah. Hey, with I'm just thinking now. Does my memory's not always good, but a long time ago, I seem to remember, and Dave, you might be able to confirm this while Bo's off getting his drink. Did Bo and Gary Challoner did some artwork for a story back in the...
That was a comic. That was a comic I did called Nasty, which was a sort of an evil version of the Southern Squadron. And it was a storyline where...
they weren't kind of evil. They were like punk rockers.
Yeah. And so what basically the idea was that these were characters drawn by another artist. And I can't... It's like so long ago now, I forget the main thrust of the story.
The pages an artist had drawn got lost.
Yeah, but they were the clue to a killing. And so they had to find the art. And the storyline itself in the comic was actually a clue to the people who had... they needed to find the storyline. And in the story, there was a clue to a serial killer, something like that. And the characters of the Southern Squadron that were drawn in it were sort of nasty versions of who they really were.
Yeah.
So the story was called Nasty as a result. And so what I ended up doing was I got Gary to do the pencils and then Bo did the inks. And I said to Gary, keep the pencils reasonably loose. And then I drew up some character sketches, which sort of showed what the nasty versions of them look like. And then the guys sort of worked on it from there. So it was kind of nice.
Yeah, did that happen? Was that one of those planned things for like 2 years? We'll get to this, or was that one of those, hey, we'll get Gary to do these pencils and we'll get Bo to ink it, like just a real sitting there one night? I've got this idea, you know. Did that happen?
Well, it was like the pages that got lost. They were found, and it would be sort of wrong if they were Gary's artwork on them. Do you know what I mean? Like the rest of the story. So they got me to do the pages that got lost. Yeah.
Oh, dude, I love the whole idea of like artists and creators like having a, I guess, jam for a musical sense together. You know, like in the last year, I've been able to do the same thing with a couple of guys, like Ryan Bella and Ben Sullivan and Rob Lyle and that, you know, and I've found the experience like extremely invaluable for me as an artist and primarily an artist and a writer. So I would assume that would have been an awesome experience back in the day doing that, because the artwork is awesome. I remember seeing it many years ago and really like being
it was
strikingly
easy.
Good.
It was easy for me because Gary handled all the anatomy questions and I just had to dirty it up. You know, I just remember it was a very easy one. And Gary's easy to ink over, you know, he's such a clean style, you know.
Yeah, no, it's just a good mesh, mate. Good mesh of styles. It just always stuck in my mind. That's why.
That was the start of this one, the Dark Squadron. You know, it was wanting to do them as monsters, do them like fantastic characters. You know, the Southern Cross cop, that the worst, he's had some terrible accident where he's had his legs pulled off. And it's just all gore. And sometimes it's like pretty like fireworks. He can glamour it. And he's and he's got his guts hanging out, you know. And if he ever lets go of the stick, he dies. and he can't ever land because he's got no legs. He can't sit down or anything.
Mm.
And so he's got dragon skin wrapped around his wrist, tying him to the stick so he'll never let it go. And the stick's a big dragon spine with a scythe blade. You know, I just kept drawing, you know. And yeah, there he is.
There you go.
There he is. And people worship him as they call him the cross, and they worship him like Jesus. And I've got lines from Prince's song, The Cross, in there.
Mm.
Yeah, and he's copped it the worst. And he's got 2 arrows, like Indian arrows, sticking out of his back. And there's no backstory to that. I just thought it would look cool. He's never pulled it out, you know. And he's sort of dead. Yeah, he's like a spook. Yeah.
It's really interesting that when Bo first proposed this idea, I just said, yeah, go for it. And I actually gave him very little direction at all. It was, for the most part, just go for your life. And if there's a problem, I'll let you know. And there never was. But what was sort of interesting was I was developing the reboot of the Southern Squadron. And one of the things which I was working on is this idea that the Southern Cross, he starts to develop a bit of an ego because he believes that he is like an angel, and that the like there's religious groups that are thinking that the dingo is in fact the devil incarnate, and that, you know, he should be basically put to death, and then there are, because he's a werewolf. And then likewise, I think Southern Cross is an angel come to earth, and so this creates a sort of an emotional tension between these characters. So I was really fascinated when Bo sort of took the Southern Cross, and he ended up doing a similar idea, that the character was being worshipped as a sort of an angel, or albeit a fallen one. So yeah, it's kind of
that fits. I couldn't do much with the dingo because he already is a monster. You know what I mean? So I couldn't change him much. I could just, you know, it more or less is the same dingo as in your comics. He's a, you know, a wise ass, you know. He cracks the jokes, and everything's sort of fun for him, you know. Yeah, and Lieutenant Smith, you can't change her either very much. I gave the spider legs, but that's something that she's wearing, that she just sort of tacked on. But otherwise, she's evil and selfish, but, you know, still in control of the group and all of that, still tells them what to do. And I didn't get much to do with Adam because he's just in action scenes. Do you know what I mean? You don't get much, you know, anything from him except the big action scenes. He goes along with it. They all know that they're getting the food and the medicine before anybody else in the town, and that's the way they want it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just like the thought process that maybe, you know, those drawings you did, like in with Nasty, as it was called, you know, like maybe, you know, many years later, those same ideas were still there to.
Oh, it is. I always
wanted
to do it again. Oh, I always wanted to do it again. The same as I've always wanted a big fight between my werewolf and Dave's. And we did get a fight between those 2 werewolves, but I would have wanted a whole comic, you know. I want to get, like, right across the city. And my werewolf can die. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So what happens is, you know, the dingo would snap his neck or something. He falls there dead, you know. And then a month later, full moon in France, and some woman goes all nuts and turns into a werewolf and is, you know, running around loose for 3 nights. And when she turns back, it's Raffiney Curse.
Yeah, yeah.
So he just gets a plane ticket home. And you know what I mean? You can't kill him. So I wanted a fight between the dingo and my werewolf that lasted months, you know, because he could always come. Yeah, yeah. And eventually they sort of, you know, become mates, and he's not going to kill him anymore. He says, he just, the dingo says, I just don't see the point. You know, you got to keep coming back like a bad penny, you know, let's go and have beers. And they sit and talk into the night about what it's like to be a werewolf. Yeah. But I wanted a whole comic for that, you know. It's
Oh man, that sounds very interesting to me. I like those sorts of things though, dude. It's because that like from an artistic perspective, that'd test, like you'd need some good writing behind that, you know, like you'd need some good choreography, you know, like art and stuff like that. You'd have to be on point. It'd be a good test.
So Lee, these are some of the projects that we've been talking about. So obviously Southern Squadron Dark is the one that is coming out at the moment. This is in the Kickstarter. This is sort of like a two issue Kickstarter with that one and this one here, Rebirth, which is where we actually bring back the Dark Nebula and the Southern Squadron. I mean, Dark Nebula's come back this year because this is the 40th anniversary of the Dark Nebula. The Southern Squadron, this is actually, it's not that far away actually, and literally, from the beginning of 2023, that's when the Southern Squadron will be 40 years old. That's when they first appeared in Oz Comics. But the Dark Nebula, the original origin story of Dark Nebula was written and published in 82, so that's 40 years now. This story was actually something that I worked on with Tad, where we actually took the characters and we rewrote the original Dark Nebula story and inserted the Southern Squadron into it. So we felt that this was a really good way to bring back these sets of characters. It's, I think, the first time they've appeared in color in a comic. I mean, Tad colored up some of the earlier material for series of graphic novels, but this one they actually appeared, and I can show you a sort of a look at. So this is the sort of the Southern Squadron are actually, while the Dark Nebula is up in space dealing with an intergalactic monster, sort of like an alien character. On Earth, the Southern Squadron are dealing with a space probe, which is linked mentally to the character up in space, and this is happening in the Pilbara. So there's a little touch of Mad Max about it, because the Southern Squadron, the Squadron Mobile is like a FJ Holden. So we thought we'd take that idea of the FJ Holden and then put it in, blend it with a tank and desert APC, and then so that's what we ended up with. So that's so those two are coming out as a Kickstarter at the moment. The next one that's coming out as well is and this will also be the second part of Southern Squadron Dark, will then come out in another Kickstarter, which will tie in with the Torn Southern Squadron crossover. So this is where we actually see that the Southern Squadron sort of enter the Torn universe, and I guess by extension, the Dark Nebula enters the Torn universe as well. And because of that, we'll actually have there's another comic that's being developed at the moment with Hayden and Tad and Ben Sullivan, where they're doing the Dark Nebula crossing over with Torn. So this is what there's TDS Torn, that's Torn, Dark Nebula, Southern Squadron, TDS 3 to the third, which is 3 series 3 times. So the 3-part series. So because we have the Southern Squadron and the Dark Nebula and Torn all linked together, and because Bodine is working the Southern Squadron into the Nightside universe, that means that the 4 titles have all sort of now formed into this sort of superhero universe. While we're doing this, just there's the alternate cover for or the second cover for the Dark Nebula Southern Squadron Rebirth, which is because we're building in a story where Lieutenant Smith and the Dark Nebula, he's an astronaut originally, so this was done by Ash Maddy, and I did the color art. So she was at Duntroon learning, to become an officer. She's about 5 years younger than him, so he was graduating, or he was actually in the backstory. He was actually one of her instructors, in officer cadet training. So that was, and there was
I like how he directs her hand there.
Yes, it's all very nice, isn't it? And this was one that I just had a little bit of fun with, which was the old cover to Southern Squadron 9, which was really, it's got the Dark Nebula there. I've got to change that. But what's interesting about that one is that I've taken Gary's original comics, original art, and then sort of darkened them up and made them more like the way they appear now, which is particularly Night Fighter, who used to be very green and gold, and we sort of swapped him out and made him more sort of darker black and green, sort of a little bit more like almost like I guess the Green Lantern's color schemes, because I've always been a bit of a fan of Green Lantern. So that's what we've got is we've got Bodine's stories coming out with both of those crossovers. So the first half of Southern Squadron Dark will come out in the Dark in the Rebirth story, the Southern Squadron Dark Nebula Rebirth, and then the other one, of course, will then appear with the Southern Squadron Torn, and then I guess eventually we'll see the Nightside storyline coming through as well. So, and is it the second part, Bo, where the Southern Cross appears in it?
The third, well, yeah, 1, 2. Yes, in the third one, the one I'm doing now, the Southern Cross is in it, and you're about to see Lieutenant Smith, and she's got the FJ Holden, but I've got the whole back of the cab of the roof in, but I will put that gun on it. Why not? You know, and it flies, vertical takeoff. It flies. It's got jets, and you'll see the two of them then. And then they also appear at the very end when there's an intervention on Nightside. And I've got, you know, like, I want to have all the superheroes show up. So there's nobody there except superheroes, but they're all dressed like normal people. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. In the
Billabong's huge, but you know what I mean? They should look normal, like just her friends have shown up. And it's like that line from Watchmen where Laurie says, all my friends are fucking superheroes, you know. Her whole life is rubbish. It's bullshit, and she's not a superhero. She's a murderous monster.
Have you got
so I've got them showing up at the end there. I did want another Bop Girl and Death Wish chapter in it, just 12 pages, and I've completely abandoned that idea. But that would have been great because you just got to know that they're in love. That first bit that you've just lettered, they're meant to be like they're in love, and then you got their origin story, but I've had to abandon it because I just like big pages with 3 panels, big pages, you know, drawing all that millions of buildings, and I just like that real fine art part of it, you know. So now I've got to take bits out that I love, which is a shame because that origin story of theirs is great. It's excellent. You know, it doesn't have any words hardly at all. It's got the lines from Age of Aquarius. You know, they're in Vietnam and they're gunning down the gooks. Harmony and understanding.
You've got a bit of a penchant for putting song lyrics in your artwork.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. The big sinner is Last Hurrah. This one that I've done for Dave. It's about nostalgia. So that's why I've got all these older characters in it. It's about nostalgia. So it's all the songs we were listening on the radio at that time. And I hate narration. So I put in the lyrics. And I remember I've stayed up here all night for weeks Googling lyrics to try and find ones that'll fit, you know. For weeks that happened. It was great fun. In the one that I've just done with Dave, it's got 2. The girl's singing Green Sleeves while she's driving along in a Mr. Whippy truck, because that's fun. And then just out of the blue, I found this song called She's Back Again, She's in My Head, and all of this. And it's about Nightside coming back, you know. Like, you know, there's billboards of her everywhere. She's on Tonight shows. She does pornos. She's got a band. You see her huge in the city and all of that. And it was a good idea not to have you see her close up for a little while. You know what I mean? And see, And she giggles like she's got a voice like a Chatty Cathy doll gone berserk. You remember Chatty Cathy? You pulled the string and it talked.
I didn't know that. I didn't know they were called a Chatty Cathy, but I do know the dolls where you pulled that thing and they'd have a yarn.
And it sounded like berserk, you know. This is Bop Girl and Death Wish. At the beginning, she wore fishnets and a cape, and she didn't need any of that. It's just I did not know what I was doing. But these are the first superheroes I ever wrote, long before I did Nightside and the Rock, or long before. That's them now. That's how you in the bottom there. That's how they used to look. She's got a cape and a fishnets, and he's wearing kinky boots like Cyndi Lauper, you know. And he's meant to be a military guy. Why is he dressed like that for Oxford Street? You know. It was just I didn't know what I was doing. So you see the now picture of him, that's way better. He wears a long black coat, wears all black, and she wears all white. And yeah, she's a teleporter, like Nightcrawler. But I'm never going to use the word teleporter. I'm going to say she relocates.
Relocates. Their handy weapon.
Hey, and this is the one that Dave's just finished lettering that I've finished, I don't know, months ago now.
Yeah. No, that looks cool too. I like it. When you're doing your layouts, Bo, because I want to get back to a Southern Squadron question in a tick, but when you're just from an art perspective, when you're doing your layouts, your thumbnails and that, you obviously, have you already got the script written, mate? Or are you just like, you've got the idea in your head?
I make dummy pages. And sometimes I'll make 4 dummy pages on exercise paper before I start on the big page. And a lot of that, the writing is in there because these are the words that are going to be set in stone, which I haven't written before. I don't have a version of the script, you know. And then I measure them and make sure they go on, you know, that it will fit onto the big page. And then I spend a lot of time in layout because I think layout's interesting. It can be interesting. And like Watchmen is the best comic on earth until this one comes out, just between us. And he often used just straight 9 panels or 6 panels. And you know, that's the rules. But if you learn the rules, you can break them and learn how to lead the eye around the page. And you do that a lot with the word clouds, you know. And then I like to break the rules and make big mess of things, you know. But sometimes I really screw it up. Like the layouts, sometimes I've finished the whole page and realised if there's a problem with the layouts. This is Battleship Down. Hang on, I'll do the light. See, there's the future Sydney, the built-up Sydney, and it's just about to be blown to pieces.
Like, because I know that like Dave and I in the past have spoken about how important lettering is and how subtle it can be to guide the reader's eyes around and stuff. It's Dave, because you're colouring, mate. When did you start colouring and things? Because you seem to have taken a real like firm grip of that of late.
Look,
like,
can you see this city?
Coming out and that? Yeah,
can
man.
You see that city?
Yep.
There you go, blind doing that stuff. You know. Yeah. But it looks great at the end. Yeah.
I started colouring back in, because I went to art college back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
So when Glenn and I started working for Malibu Comics, we sort of started working for them because they wanted to take the Southern Squadron. They'd already signed the Jack Roo to be repackaged for the Americans, and then they asked Gary Challoner if he had anything else, and he said, "Yeah, I've done this Southern Squadron material." So they got in touch with me because the first 2 episodes were with Gary's work. So they bought the first 4, those 2, and then the next 2, and then I had material that I hadn't published, including that nasty story that we're talking about that hadn't published in Australia. So we did a second series. And while that was all getting done, we also were doing the Bodyguard, which was a series that we'd done for Penthouse magazine.
Yep.
And then we'd done some stuff. There was a series called Rip Snorter, which was a biker magazine, and Full Throttle, Raw Tonnage, which was a trucker magazine character. So we combined them into a book called Full Throttle. And while that was going on, I did the old Jack Kirby thing, and when I was at Malibu, I said, "Look, I'd love to do something. What do you guys have that Glenn and I could do? And I'll take the shittiest thing you've got, but just what I would like is just the free right to do whatever I like with it." And they said, "Look, we've got this thing called the Puppet Master, which was these little puppets that sort of ran around and murdered people." And the backstory was that it was set in the modern era, but the Puppet Master had actually created them in Nazi Germany. And I thought, little puppets running around murdering people in Berlin with the Nazis. That's so I just said, "Can I don't want to do their story. I just want to do my own." And they said, "Yeah, go for your life." So Glenn and I had a look at it and I said, okay, I think we can really have some fun with this. So I'd worked in horror, of course, because as Bo was saying, we'd done stuff like that with Fantastique. So we created this 4-part series, and Charlie Band, who was the Full Moon guy, he loved it. And so he said they were willing to kick in some extra money to get them coloured and asked if I'd be willing to colour them. So I ended up colouring that. Turned out that was the first colour comic that Malibu had ever done, which was really cool.
Yeah, right.
And they liked that so much that they then they liked my color art on the covers as well, so that they actually had this comic which was a combination of the Planet of the Apes and Alien Nation, so they called it Ape Nation, where the planet, I think the aliens went to the Planet of the Apes, so same sort of idea. And they asked me if I'd be happy to color that, so I said, all right, I'll do that as well. So I was sort of doing a lot of color art at that stage, mainly because
I didn't know the Puppet Master was their first colored one.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And then when we got to America for the next trip, we met Charlie Band, and he said, I'd like to buy the artwork, the original art. And it was a flat fee. I can't remember the exact amount. It was in the thousands, a significant amount of money at the time. And so we said, yeah, okay, great. And then they said, oh, by the way, we really liked the storyline you did. And so our third Puppet Master movie is based, well, he sort of said loosely based on that script. And it was actually, it was more than loosely based. Some of the characters had the same names that we'd invented. And the whole premise of the story was exactly what we'd written in the comic strip series. So that was a lot of fun. We never got any official credit for it, which I would have liked, but the moment they credit you, then they have to start paying you money. So I kind of saw that. And I always sort of felt that the fact that they bought the original art was a sign, was kind of our payment. I think that was because it was a very generous amount that they offered. So we thought, okay, well, what the hell? But yeah, that was a bit of fun. So I retained sort of the role of colorist. So when we did the Phantom, I colored that as well.
Yeah.
And we started out doing a lot of hand color art, but over time it sort of shifted over to computer. And it was kind of a bit hard in the beginning because you'd actually you weren't sure how detailed you needed to color it. And then often you had to provide written notes and even give them the what was the Pantone colors for them, or these days you'd give RGB or hex values. And then what they would then do is they would then color it on the computer. So in effect, you were setting up the color guides, and then they would actually do the physical work. These days, of course, you just color it yourself. I started coloring on computer probably mid-90s. So that was when we were doing the Full Moon stuff. That was what, in 90, 91, 92. Computer colors back then were really simple. It was almost just colors with maybe a bit of gradation and so forth. The sort of level of coloring didn't really get going until, I don't know, maybe if you look at the colors in the 90s, they were pretty ordinary. I think it was probably, I'm trying to think, because maybe late 90s that we actually started to see color starting to, look like it does now. These days, I think the color art is so impressive that some of the black and white art starts to lose its dimension. See, I always think black and white art should stand up without the need to be colored. But a lot of colorists these days are doing they're providing the tonal values as well. Where in like Bo, he like, if you look at his art, like all right, well, look at this one here. So you can see that, I mean, the color has provided a certain amount of the modeling.
Beautiful.
And it's got a little bit of a, what's her name, Cher look about it.
Oh no, you said this. Oh, fuck.
Which I really like. I think she looks great. But the point is that in black and white, that holds up. It doesn't need the color to the color enhances, and I think it does improve the the overall look. But
I've got 4 pages of Last Hurrah that are coloured, and it looks better in black and white. You know, it's why bother with it if it looks as good as it does in black and white. I like it in black and white. And you can see from my stuff that I try and do half black and half white. You know, I also like the huge amount of detail, and I hate the idea that somebody's going to put, you know, dark blue all over that, you know. Yeah, I know I'm happy in black and white for the moment. I got the iPad given to me, but I haven't used it. I don't have the patience to learn how to colour. But, you know, the stuff I'm doing at the moment, I'm pleased with. It's the best stuff I've done. The story's going to blow their minds if they ever get to read it. It's a joke. It's got a punchline. Yeah.
I mean, the approach, every artist has their own style. This is sort of an example. This is where Torn and the Southern Squadron meet for the first time. He goes up against the Dingo. And what I wanted to do there was, because the villains are these little, it's like, this is a little fairy. Steve Carter would love that. And this is a little goblin. So I wanted the colors to have a feel of like, almost like those really early Disney, you know, like Snow White type things, where and you can see that the colors, while most of the work in the color is actually done in the selection rather than in the modeling. So, for example, those leaves, as you can see, they're flat color. There's a lot of gradient work there, but there's actually very little to no modeling on the characters themselves. I've really tried to keep them, allow Ben's art and his placement of blacks to do all of the work. The colors are really there to just add a little bit of accentuation to what's there. So really what I'm working with mostly is the hue and to some extent the brightness and the level of saturation. But so I'm playing around a lot with the actual the colors themselves, but not actually modeling the colors, because I think once you start modeling, you're beginning to take on some of the role of the penciler artist, and that's not of itself a bad thing, but I try to sort of limit that as much. So what I have done is, with like Lieutenant Smith, I've tried to give a little bit of shine to her uniform. But the other characters, again, other than a bit of modeling, the Night Fighter's got a few highlights just to give it a slightly shiny look. But again, you can see there that the intent is more just to capture the sense of it's really just set. It's just in some part from mainly narrative clarity, I guess, maybe because I'm a writer, I tend to think in terms of color providing narrative clarity. And there are different, I mean, you can use color for a number of different ways, just as you can do any type of art. You can make it where it's diegetic, where it's actually telling the story, or you might use it for symbolism, or you might use it for emotion, or you might use it just for aesthetics, just for for decorative qualities. I guess for me, the primary thing is first and foremost is to sort of enhance the storyline, to give it that drive, and then I like to create a sense of time and place. But aesthetically too, I like to have how would I describe it? Give each scene its own color. What would you call it? Like its own color signature, so that So when people are actually, like, for example, when you're actually in a moment, so for example, we've decided at the moment that this came out of working on this in the Dark Nebula at the same time, that anytime they're using sort of telekinetics or magical powers, I'm kind of using purple and different types of purple to sort of create that sort of look. When we're looking at this character here, I've sort of tried to go with a very steampunky feel, so it's all sort of very much golds and browns and with slightly sort of green feel. That every time you're in that environment, it sort of, very much that you're in that place.
Go back one, Dave. Go back one.
This one?
Go back one. No, the one before. There, that panel one. Go forward one.
This one?
Yeah, this one. panel 3 of that's excellent.
Yeah.
What,
Yeah,
this
that's excellent. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great panel. Isn't it great drawing people flying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you are you thinking about
There's
these
another
colours
example
before you
where-
see the artwork, Dave, or do you get the artwork in and then
Say again?
you start? Do you already have the colours and the ideas and stuff worked out like that you're gonna go with before you see the artwork, or is it not until you've seen the art that you start like, oh, that'd work there, or are you already, this is what it's going to look like in your mind from a
Well, you have
colour?
to see the art, I think. You'd have to.
Look, it's a little bit of both. For example, where am I? Yeah, so this is an example where I like working with a lot of layers. So when this originally, what I did was I knew sort of what the colors were of the main characters, because the Night Fighter's kind of predominantly green.
Yeah.
Southern Cross is predominantly blue, Lieutenant Smith's predominantly purple, and the Dingo's predominantly orange. So that makes it easy because those characters are the non-primary colors, so they all sort of sit. Well, I guess the Southern Cross is sort of, when I say blue, it's really more of a cyan, so that's sort of again a secondary color, but you get the idea. So the beauty of those 4 character colors is that you can then stick them against primaries very easily, and so they sit out of that environment. But with this one, what I started with was just, I laid down just flats of green, and various different green hues, and then I said, okay, well, this is at night, now I'm going to knock the green right back. And so as you can see, what I've done there is those have been desaturated to the point where they're becoming more gray. And so I've got other areas here where some of the background areas I've allowed to sort of become a little greener, just simply so they stand out against it, so that that's, I'm trying to sort of create the sense of the distance, and rather than coming out of a black background, because the Night Fighter's costume's very dark. Effectively, it's like almost like a moonlit real effect. So to some extent, as Bo says, you kind of need to see the art to know which way you're going to go with it. But in terms of the narrative colors, I kind of know what they're going to be going in. So I'll know that this is going to be a predominantly orange scene or a predominantly red scene, or, whatever. But then within that, you start how much of the saturation is played with, how much of the brightness, the luminosity. That really depends on how. That's less about the story and more about trying to make it well, I suppose it is a story, because you're trying to make it narratively clear to separate the characters out. I don't like stories where the colors are overwhelming the line art and overwhelming the visuals. I'm a big fan of, like with a poster, I reckon, if you put it across the room and everything stands out clearly and you can identify all the key dynamic elements, that's working. But if you look across the room and it becomes this big muddy mess, at that point I start to think, okay, that's not the hierarchy of visual is starting to get a little bit lost. And I sort of feel that if that is true at a distance, that should also be true on the page. So for me, I kind of, if I feel it's getting a bit lost, I'll step right back, go to the other side of the room and look at it. And if the geometry is still holding together, then it's working. If it's not, then okay, then I've got to start to work it back. And I reckon, Bo, that's the same with black and white, isn't it? Your work holds up very well, because I think all of your pages work almost as posters, because you don't clutter everything up in the way you use your black and white art.
Oh, that's the dummy pages. That really helps me. Sometimes I have 4 dummy pages before I start on the big page, and I know it's going to fit. And then and I draw way too big. You know this. I draw way too big, and then I photograph it, send it to Kelly, measure it, say I want this at 12 centimeters long, and then she'll bring it back, and then I'll cut it out and stick it on the page. And so I've got a time where I can shift stuff around on the page. You cut them out like paper dollies, and you can save room that time and have more room for words, which you're fighting for the whole time. But no, it seems to work. I gave up on the idea of learning colours because it's not going to help me tell a story at all. You know, I want to learn how to tell a story properly. I've got stories in mind. I've got good ones. And the colours, learning how to do colours isn't going to really help me that much. You know, so I'll continue doing what I'm good at doing. Yeah.
But you've always
I've
maintained.
really good.
How
Pardon?
often have you ever coloured in the past? I can't really think of something.
Oh, I did the tarot cards, and I've done stuff, but that was on Photoshop. And the tarot cards, I had them already drawn for a long time before I managed to learn how to colour them. And I picked the ones I wanted to do first. And you can really tell some are really quite primitive, the colours. They're really quite bucket here, yellow, bucket here, you know. That's one that Dave coloured, which
That looks awesome.
At the end of the tarot cards I could do quite well, but that's the only kind of, posters and things like,
Awesome.
See, the dingo always has his mouth open. So see is like an angel, isn't he? The Southern Cross. He's you could, that's why I wanted them sort of worshipping him, but he's got the Dwarf Nebula.
Looks awesome. Great art, great colours too.
Yeah, there's little Forge, with her guns, and the female Dark Nebula, the Dark Phantasm. Yeah.
So that's where I sort of started to get into the modelling a little bit. With the metallic stuff, I find that anything that's naturally shiny, a little bit of
there's
modelling.
gorgeous lights on the gun, and on metal, and made her look real three-dimensional. That's a beauty. That's where she actually glows, isn't it? Yeah, and it's there's a bondage theme, and it's a wine glass, so it's the Princess of Cups.
So, like, for anyone that's looking at this artwork and being blown away like I am, like, where can you pick up these images?
These will come out as add-ons or
as little cards,
cards and posters and so forth to these series. We're still working out how we're going to do it, but so you can see that the basic approach here is I like to keep the palette limited. Usually use complementary colors. If there's modeling in some part of the image, like for example with her, then I'll just limit the background to either flats or usually some sort of gradient. Same with that, so that it's you create an element of dimension. The eye has to sort of seek out one thing over another. So if the whole thing is, I hate what's called chocolate box, where everything, you open a chocolate box, the whole point is that everything's supposed to jump out at you so you can pick things apart.
Yeah.
I like unity and hierarchy in it. So again, that's a very limited palette, but we're using saturation to separate the colors out and luminosity, obviously. The colors there are remarkably similar in that respect. But used in again, the rocks there, it's all about the saturation mainly. When they're originally placed, they were quite brown, and then they started off almost like as sort of cracked earth, and then over time they started to get reduced. That's about as limited as a palette as you can get. It's really just green and sort of
works
with a shifting the green into the yellow in some areas, a little bit of cyan just pulling the green in the other direction, but other than that, it's really all tone. And saturation's doing 90% of that. That was the first one of those I colored. Again, very limited palette. And with it's all, but you can see there's a shitload of modeling in that. That's probably the most modeled of all of them.
Well, so this artwork here, is this part of what you were saying, Bo? You did a 48-page story for Southern Squadron Dark, and are some of those other drawings you were talking about?
Yeah, that's what jumped it from 48 pages to 60.
Gotcha.
I did all of it. Yeah.
And these will be add-ons in this campaign or in further campaigns?
I've no idea.
Yeah, I think we're still playing with those ideas. Ultimately, there'll be a set of cards and a set of pinups that will be used. Whether we do it all in the one campaign or we split them up over 2 or 3, I'm not sure. We're still working our way through that. So
yeah, no, that's cool. And
can you send me any of that finished stuff to my phone, Dave, so I can get them printed out and show the guys?
I thought you had all of these.
No, some of them I haven't. I haven't got the shoe one. I haven't had the ones where you've had to put sparklies on them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, so we'll sort of start winding it down a little bit. Now, there's always 2 questions that I like to ask the guests that are on. I take it from my perspective of being a dude up in far north Queensland that really, until COVID happened and, you know, ComX happened and meeting you guys, you know, like, you know, meeting other creators and artists and stuff in Australia, I always liked myself to, if you're that lonely person sitting somewhere that wants to do comic books and doesn't know how to do them, as we've all sort of been there and started off, you know, what are the hows and what are the whys, as in to get yourself, you know, like motoring along, the first steps that you found back in your times and stuff?
I used to tell the kids at art, the why you'd want to do art is to make yourself happy. And if you're happy, you won't do any art. And sometimes it's a way to fight boredom. And sometimes it's a great way to comment and hold a mirror up to society. I tell them when they're bored, that's the time when you do art. And any art, even if you're not happy with it at all and you throw it away, is worth something because you're going to learn from those mistakes. You know, the why we do it is sometimes it's you know, it's philosophy, isn't it? I do it because it's the only thing I'm good at, and it keeps me together. I look forward to the nights where I can sit up all night and I'm writing and drawing it at the same time, and I just know it's going to blow their minds, you know. And I've never written a story like this before. I've never written a story like the one I did for Dave either. But the thing that's common with my stories is that everybody dies at the end. Yeah. It happened at first with Nightside on the Rock, and so we could never do an issue 4 because everyone died at the end of issue 3, everybody. And this one with Dave, yeah, everyone dies again, except for the Jackaroo and Nightside. She escapes into outer space and he escapes back in time. Yeah, but everyone dies.
So for you, Bo, how was it that got you your first gig, mate? Like, where were you? What did you decide to do? I can draw. I wrote a few pages. You know, what am I going to do?
I was getting the Phantom, and I was in the Phantom Club, and they send you this magazine called Jungle Drums. And there was a competition in the magazine, and you had to do a 2-page story about how the Phantom met his dog. Now, didn't they get that wrong? It's a wolf. It's a wolf.
Yes.
You think they would know? Anyhow, so I did 2 pages for the competition, and the Phantom looked too much like the Vision from the Avengers a bit. But anyhow, I did these 2 pages and I won. They gave me this.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Right. And I had that broke a couple of years ago, and I went and had it fixed, and it's worth about $400 in silver. It's really, yeah. And so I'd drawn 2 pages, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where to put word clouds. I put them in the wrong place. And then Kelly and we went to Coffs Harbour for 2 weeks to live in a caravan on the beach. And it was May holidays, and it was my birthday, and she got me How to Draw the Marvel Way.
That's right? The big John Buscema book, isn't it?
Yeah. And I copied everything that was in that book and drew lots on that 2 weeks. And I'd just started. I'd started properly and thought, I want to do this for a living. I want to be able to do this to make money. It looks like I'm learning, you know. And I've still got some of the pictures from that first couple of weeks, but up till then I just sort of doodled, you know. I did comics in school a little bit, you know. You'd pull out the 2 pages from your exercise book and you make that into a 4-page comic. And it was about a guy who went to a private school like mine, and you know, it's all I knew. And you know, teachers would cane kids to death and that kind of thing. Yeah, but you know, little bits and pieces. But getting that book, How to Draw the Marvel Way, it shows you exactly what to do. It shows you what works. And if you want to fuck around with it, that's on you. But no, I learned how to do it from that, and it still is. Through the 11 years I did art, about 10 kids bought that book, you know. And when they had the book fair, I made sure that they're in paperback now, but they're still the same thing. And it's an excellent book. It's an excellent book.
Mate, I can tell you that I actually bought that book when I was a kid, because I used to love the trade paperbacks that had the pencil sketches and how a comic's put together in the back of them. And
there were some things that I could see, but they just weren't self-evident. Like there was one page, I know it really well. It had a guy looking like Tarzan, I guess, and he's standing there with his arms folded, and then next to him you have Captain America, which had that wow factor, and you realise, they stand their legs further apart, and the top half of him is wider, and you could see that first guy looked pretty athletic, looked pretty strong, but no, not next to Captain America.
Not
and
quite as dynamic. It taught you
they
a
showed
heap of diamond. Like to make things a little bit more exaggerated in that sort of sense.
And when you're drawing faces, you keep it as simple as you can, so you can use expression. And that's one of the real tricks that you've got to learn, is if you're drawing Reed Richards, that drawing has to change every panel, but it always has to be Reed Richards. You know, you have to learn how to do the character from any angle and still be that character. And that took a lot for me. That was difficult. And the real big one was hands. I would try and hide the hands. I would have people with the leather jacket pockets or their hands behind their back. I would try and hide them. And then I told the kids at the art class, don't worry about the hands, they're too hard. Fuck, what an idiot. I eventually got a book on hands and I worked it out. It's a wedge, basically. And anyhow, I learned how to draw hands really well, because I didn't like it that I had that hole in my education, you know. And now I realise you can use hands to tell the story. Hands and eyebrows, gesticulating. You can have a character say something, but his body language tells you that he's lying.
Yes.
And it gets interesting there. You know, Ben is really good at this, you know, this realism, this gesticulating that he does. These characters, when they're walking, they look like they're walking, they look like they've got weight. And I want to get there, but Ben's way ahead of me. I want to drink his blood. Don't tell him.
Maybe get some extra powers there, mate.
Oh, no. The point, no, don't get extra. The point is just to live longer.
Yeah,
see if you can get some of his talent off him, because he's way ahead of me.
And that's Ben Sullivan you're talking about, mate. That's the artist that's doing the Southern Squadron Dark Nebula stuff.
Yeah, I know. He sent me a thing about Sharon, the guy, the ferryman that takes you across the river Styx to the capital city of hell. And he's got a story about that. And I don't want to blow smoke, but that's one of the prettiest comic stories I've ever seen. I don't mean Australia, I mean I've ever seen. He sent me that. It was beautiful. I've got to go and print them out and put them in order so I can read the story, because it's all muddled up. But God, he's good. He's good. He's got an eye to make things look three-dimensional and round and fat and depth. You know, he's real good.
Well, I had the pleasure of doing inking some of Ben's artwork for Ring Around the Rosie, which is a little comic book from Rob Lyle, myself, Ryan Bella, and Ben Sullivan. And you've seen a lot of the artwork.
Yep.
And mate, his pencil's strong, like really strong, knows what he wants, and to ink over the top of taught me huge lessons just from, because I ink myself. I'm quite loose with my pencils, you know, and that was the first time I'd come across, wow, this dude's really prepped this page so that, you know, there's not heaps of questions. Just, great artist, man. I'm 100% with you. Good dude, too. Hell of a dude.
Yeah, I had some of Jason's stuff at one stage, and we didn't need to use it. It was just stuff that he wasn't going to use, and it was just fun to do Jason's stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just all, you know, hair, but it was just very, very simple.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
very proud of hair, but that did well. That was like 15 years that we worked on that.
Dude,
and for a little while,
I bought Hair But the Hippo and issue 1, 2, and 3 from a newsagent. I think it was called the Northtown Newsagents in the Townsville City Mall, mate, when it first came out. They're sitting over there in my portal.
They used to put Hair But out, and I'd see them in the newsagents, and there'd be other Australian comics in there too. There was Tim's comic, there was Dave's comic, and I would pinch the Hair But ones. And they still have to pay for them because they don't have the mastheads, and then I'd just give them away.
Yeah. Oh, well, fair business decision, I guess, Matt. So Dave, for you, mate, what are your whys and hows, mate? For anyone out there listening that you know, you've trailblazed Australian comics as well as Bo has, and you know.
Dave's
Why
done
do
much
you do,
better than
why
I
do you
have.
do it to yourself, Dave? And how did
the
you do it?
why? The why is pretty simple. It was the first time I ever did anything where I could see. I remember doing it and then saying to myself, I could see myself getting up and doing this every day for a living. I'd farted around with other things before that, even other art projects, but this was the first time I could actually see, okay, this is I can imagine myself getting up in the morning, going to the studio, and this is what I would do. And I think that to be successful in anything, you know, they talk about, you know, visualizing and manifesting, and that can get a little bit wanky, but there's some underlying truth to it, which is that I talk to people, like if they want to get into film directing or film writing or comics or whatever, and they say, how do I do it? And my answer is, you need to just start doing it. And then one comic book writers write, comic book artists draw. And if you are drawing comics, you're a comic book artist. That's it. Then getting good is a result of, you know, doing it over and over often enough. Screwing up, there's nothing like, you know, putting a comic out and nobody buying it to force you to realize that, you know, all of those theories that you had are bullshit, and that you need to start thinking about, well, what works. And you very quickly learn that the people who have come before you were not idiots, and they were not ignorant, and they probably knew more than you. And so there's a lot to be said for just looking at the way other people have done things, finding the one that is doing it the closest to the way you would do it, and then starting to emulate that work. You can call it homage, you can call it cloning, you can call it ripping off. I don't care what term you use, but it's look, if you said, oh yeah, but if I start drawing like Kirby, I'm just going to become a Kirby clone. Oh, you should be so lucky. I mean, seriously, it won't happen. You'll end up
evolve. You start evolving.
Your own work will get. Yeah, your own work gets in there whether you like it or not. And so there is no real danger of losing yourself. That's a guarantee. So my genuine belief is that if you want to draw like Jack Kirby or John Buscema or Bo Jardine, then actually do a bit of research about who they are, not just as artists, but as people. Where do they live? What do they do? What do they eat? Where do they go? What pub do they drink in? I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but like
no, it's writing. You work from a higher framework.
Yeah.
And so you learn as much as you can. That doesn't seem to be anything to do with what you want to do eventually, but it's a higher framework. You know, it's
when Gary Challen and I met Mike Grell, he and Mike Barron, interested kept meeting Mike's. They both said, you guys should come over to America. You should come to the San Diego Con. Back then, the San Diego Con was not much bigger than what the cons are here in Australia. It might have even been a little bit smaller, to be honest. But it was great. 3/4. There were three main groups who were there in almost equal numbers. There were the professionals who were the artists. There were the professionals who were within the industry itself. And then there were the mug punters. So the punters only made up about a third of the total. And we all kind of interacted and got on with each other really, really well. And Gary and I went over there with one purpose in mind, and it was just to get a feel for what it involves, whether what we were doing was in alignment with what they were doing in the States, and moreover, would the Americans be even interested in working with Australians? And we met guys like Neil Gaiman and Garth Innes over the years, and became very friendly with them. And the beauty was that those guys had trailblazed. They were Brits and they'd got in there. And so the idea of working with Australians didn't seem that outrageous. That, yeah, there's the time zone. And look, it's so much easier now. Back then, there was no internet, so it was much harder to get the work in. But it was... But when after we'd been to San Diego, we just went and hung out with Mike, and I went to Mike Grell, and I hung out with guys like John Ostrander and that, and literally just spending a week at their house, sort of making that your base, then going off and seeing the Marvel and DC editors, but just hanging out and realizing, yeah, these are real people. This is a real career. This is what they do. They get up in the morning, they sit down at their desk, they do this, and this, and you just slowly develop an idea that, yeah, this isn't a dream, this is actually a real job and that's what I would say to any budding creator getting out there is imagine your life as an artist or a writer, and if you can't, then find them, go to a con, buy the creators who you admire a beer, and just say, so what do you do in the morning? What do you do, from 10 until 12? How many days do you sit at the desk? If you and you just sort of develop friendships and relationships. I know that sounds sort of complicated, but it's not really. Most creators are pretty easy to get on with, and usually, as Lee, we've got the Ugle Club where a lot of the guys just hang out and chat on a Thursday evening. There's a lot of people who, I mean, if I was an artist, I would definitely get involved with the guys from Comics X and get involved on the drink and draws on a Friday night, talk to people, learn about it, and just do it. And you will get better. Just do. I looked through all of those books on how to draw and so forth, and I took away some of it. But it's funny how you kind of do and you don't at the same time. It's very hard to sort of get rid of yourself. And so I don't know. I don't think there's any one way to achieve it, but other than just saying, just do it. So if you are a writer and you want to write comics, find an artist who doesn't and work with them. That's always a good starting place. If you are an artist and you want to draw, just start drawing. Find a writer that writes that, talk to people who are already in the business and say, well, will you work with me? And if they won't, well, do you know somebody who will? And, you can start pointing people towards each other. And all else fails, just start writing scripts or start drawings, even if you don't have an end use in mind, because trust me, after you've done that for 2 or 3 months, you'll find a reason to do it properly,
Yeah. 100%.
But if you have to ask yourself why, then you probably it's in your blood. I think if I said to you, Lee, why do you do it? You say because it's who I am. I mean, there's no. If I said you can never draw or write again, what would you do?
I don't know. I pondered that question myself with, these weird existential questions you have jokingly with mates sometimes, like what would happen if you went deaf or if you went blind? People have those yarns. We've all had those yarns. And man, I would much rather, I can tell you, go deaf myself. I wouldn't like to do either of them, or anything bad, but because if I lost my eyesight, you know what I mean, I wouldn't be able to draw. And for me, drawing is a compulsion. I can't tell you why I do it, mate. It's just I need to do it. It's one of those things I've worked into the routine of my life. I guess I've said to other people, it's my meditation. Time to get away and reflect, and put my vision of the world and what I'm feeling that day onto paper, and whatever I'm writing with Tam at that moment. It's one thing I definitely will agree with you on, though, man, is because I'm only a baby in comparison to where you two have been and for how long you've been, in Australia comics and stuff like that. But the the thought of having people that are now friends and people like yourself, Dave, Gary Challoner, Bo, that, you know, like when I was a kid, I was picking up your comic books from newsstands and comic shops and knew who you were, you know, like not
So
visually.
we probably owe you some money now.
Yeah, no, but, you know, like to have that opportunity is amazing, and to be able to talk to you guys, you know, because I mean, I've spoken to you, all of you, and even friends, man, other people in the comics community and other people, you do pick up snippets, you learn through talking to these people. Like I've, over the last, I guess, 12 months, just become a huge just information sponge on particularly Australian comic book history, you know, like loving, you know, like just talking to people about what happened in the, you know, 30s, 40s to where to, you know, like the 80s period where you guys kicked it on. I mean, the Gerald Carr stuff, you know, like or like with Victim and things like that. I love learning this stuff, man. And
you know, there was that one guy that was a murderer, don't you?
Oh yes, yeah. No, Daniel's told us all about.
Yeah, I've got the book here. Yeah.
No, good book. That it's not for the faint of heart, but it's a good yarn. And there's all levels of people, but that's the beautiful thing about it is you know is just create. So I'm 100% with both of you. So look, I've loved talking to you because you know, like I haven't seen either of you in quite some time, so it's always nice to catch up and yarn.
Well, you're welcome at the thing on Thursdays.
I know. I just get stuck working, mate. I don't get home till like 7 o'clock and stuff, so I can't sort of, you know, like pop in all the time. But you know, with Christmas coming up, you'll probably see me poke my head in because it's like I've got some time off. I'm, as I said, just everything's slowing down a little bit at the moment, so I can live a little and, you know, breathe and stuff. So as is a nice thing to do at the holiday season. But Dave and Bo, for anyone out there that's watched this show, where can we find your works? Now I know, Bo, that your stuff, there's a lot of stuff on Facebook, which is Smack Freak and
BoMartinardine.com. If you do go onto Smack Freak, then you've got to like press the button and then wait 5 minutes because it's like 82 pages. It takes a long time. Yeah, and then do it. But yeah, I'm happy to show it off now. It's it came from a very, very dark place. You know, just the stuff that happens in that is real. And I had to take out stuff at the very last minute. My ex said, "This is about prostitution, Bo." And I says, "I know, don't you think it's glorious? I can do this sort of scary horror thing about drag queens getting beat up." And she says, "You'll get your head kicked in, Bo. Don't." So I took out 8 pages. It originally had more in it, but yeah, I'm proud of it now. And at the time, it was very, God, it was a weird thing to just hand it to people. It's like an open confessional. You know, it's saying this is what happened. This is what happened to me, and now I'm okay. And now I've done a comic book about it. You know, it was just the best thing I've ever done. Yeah, I can't ever do it again. Yeah, I can't ever do it again. But it was a good thing to do at the time. I've got 1 copy of it left, 1 out of 10,000.
Well, it'd be lovely to see that in print again one day.
Oh, it's the money, and it's 82 pages. Nobody's going to want to do it, you know. It's, you know, and it'd be ridiculous to try and divide it up into 3. You know, that was the problem with Pothead. It's also about 80 pages, and the social worker ladies who said they would get the money so that I could print it disappeared. They ghosted, and then I asked a few people around, well, why did that happen? And it's because it's 80 pages. It's huge, you know. It's I'd put them out again if I had the chance, or you know, or if somebody wanted to do print on demand. But I don't want to do it. You know, I've only got so many brain cells left.
For the new material, Lee, people can go on Kickstarter. If you just put in Southern Squadron Dark or Dark Nebula. I think if you put in Dark Nebula, that will take you to the Dark Nebula Southern Squadron crossover, and then the Southern Squadron Dark work will be in there as well.
Yep.
The Kickstarter campaign continues through until I think we're about halfway through it. So towards the end of this month, it'll conclude. There will be opportunities for people to pick up the work as add-ons, I guess, with subsequent Kickstarters. But there's so many people sort of talk to me and say, "Oh, gee, I really wish that I could have been there in the early days of Cyclone when you guys were starting out." And I guess the argument then I would say is that if you're one of those people, then this is a renaissance which is actually happening, and it's really hard for people to get a feel for it until they see it in the rearview mirror and go, "Oh, wow, there it is." But what we're talking about is we're taking what I think was sort of the spirit of the Cyclone universe, which was where there was myself and Tad and Gary and Glenn were all working together started out on our own characters, but very quickly by the second or third book, they were all working into each other's storyline. So rather than a 4-part anthology, it became a sort of a collective of what became effectively the Cyclone universe. Gary is still playing with the Jackaroo and Flash Domingo on his own, but the Dark Nebula is still part of that little universe, and so is the Southern Squadron for that matter, and we'll never completely pull those worlds apart. So what we're talking about here is unifying the Southern Squadron and the Dark Nebula, or reunifying them together because they've appeared in the past. Then we're bringing them in with the Torn characters. The Southern Squadron have appeared with Nightside and the Rock before, but it was sort of almost like a guest starring in each other's storylines. Bo is definitely working the Southern Squadron more centrally into his storylines. I'm planning on, returning the favor. So you're talking about
this story really needed to have somebody, and the Southern Cross was perfect.
Yeah.
Just
so
perfect.
we're getting this sort of and Reverie. I think people need to realize Reverie is having its 40th birthday too.
Yeah.
That was around at the same time. It's one of the oldest publications, and certainly would be the oldest current publication because Reverie was around before Cyclone. So, I mean, you've got to give you've got to give Gaza sort of chops for that. It was, I think it came out in 82. So same year, this is its 40th anniversary as well.
Yeah.
So you're seeing a pretty sort of exciting rebirth of these characters, hence the title. And it is, I mean, we had to come up with a name for this period because when we were doing it in the 80s, we didn't know it was called the Bronze Age. That was just something that was sort of dumped on it later.
Yeah.
And we said, well, what's this era? And nobody could really give it a name. So we said, well, I guess it's a renaissance. So, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out in the next 2 to 3 years where we're going to see a lot of Southern Squadron, a lot of Dark Nebula, a lot of Nightside, a lot of Torn. So for those people who want to be in on that, now's the time. And like I've still got you, but I've still got my old vinyls. And when you've got a copy of Led Zeppelin 4 or Revolver from the Beatles, it's cool for two reasons, not just because you've got a copy of that album, but because the reason why that album became popular is because people like you got off your ass, put your hand in your pocket and went and paid your money. So you are a small part of the success of Led Zeppelin or of the Beatles or whomever, because if nobody had bothered to buy their records, they wouldn't have become who they were. It's kind of the same. Everybody who actually bought a Cyclone or bought a Nightside or bought a Dark Nebula or a Southern Squadron or whatever, if you were one of those people, thank you. You were the reason why that stuff happened. Why, we would have kept going in some form, but if nobody had bought it, it wouldn't have been the phenomenon that it was. And so I guess we always felt this and we made this very clear in the letters and the editorials that, we're not doing this on our own. We're doing it with you. You guys are as important to this as we are. I know that sounds a little bullshitty, but it's kind of true. We always, anybody ever says, "Oh, I bought stuff," I still feel incredible gratitude and a sense of humility, actually, that that, you know, we were just screwing around, and the idea that people actually liked it and were hanging out for it, that is just very humbling, you know.
Yeah.
So my goal going forward, and I think this is the same with you, Bo, and as with Tad, is that, like, at some point we're going to be under the ground. You know, nobody lives forever, but it would be nice to think that long after we're gone, our characters continue and become part of the, you know, what Australian comic history is all about.
It happened with
Lovecraft 40
Lovecraft.
years ago, but after 40 years, you start to believe it's possible, you know. So
It happened with Lovecraft. He had these characters, he died, and all of his science fiction cronies took on those characters, and they've sold thousands and thousands of books of his characters, between, you know, the cosmic or god monster type squirmy things that he did. And that continues on for this day, those characters with the same names. Yeah. You'd hope somebody else, some little kid will, you know, see Nightside on the Rock and want to do their own.
Yeah, well, I mean, you obviously, which is great to hear, got plans to work together for, you know, like as long as you can with both of these comic books, and you're doing your colouring and stuff. I mean,
Dave has to do my lettering. Yeah, you should put your name on it, Dave. When it says story and pictures by Bo Jardine, you should say David DeVries lettering, because I didn't do it. You should put your name on it.
I'll whack that in somewhere.
Yeah.
But you know, like what made the Southern Squadron for me a lot of fun was the fact that, you know, we did crossovers with Boris the Bear in America, and you know, they appeared in Grimjack, and you know, so the characters were allowed to play in other people's universes. And you know, I've said this before, you know, any creator in Australia who wants to put the Southern Squadron in their storylines, just let me know and we'll work something out. I don't want money. I just think it would be great to, you know, see these characters sort of continue. I think that, and you know, there was a very long period where I sort of moved over into film and television, where I still maintained an interest in comics and still kept my hand in comics, but the Southern Squadron basically went into hiatus from about 95 through till 2015. So for 20 years, they just they were still being published and repackaged and so forth, but no new material was being created. And it was, and I honestly thought that was just a part of my life that was sort of interest, but you know, I was doing other things, and I didn't think that I would come back to them, and then here we are. So
yeah. Have you got any other plans to like reprint some of your classic indie stuff, like we were talking about with Nasty and things like that? You know, before
at some point, maybe I would,
if they want it. If it looks like they want it, then we'll consider it. But otherwise, probably not, I reckon.
I mean, what I really want to do, Lee, is re-establish the characters. So I've got like a 12-part story arc that Gary Deller's trying me to get into print as soon as possible, and that's the next step.
Yep.
So there's these the fact that they're appearing in 6 issues next year, you know, 3 with Torn, 3 with Dark Nebula, should give the readers a good sense of what they're doing. I'm doing 4 short stories for the Comics Presents. God, so many of these which I promised, you know, but they've just. But again, these things just take a lot longer than you think. You know, the enthusiasm gets excited. We're all kind of jumping in during COVID. You know, we had nothing to do, so. Once COVID sort of relaxed, everybody suddenly realized, hey, there's a world out there other than just doing comics. And so things have slowed down a little bit compared to where they were in those heady days a couple of years back. But yeah, I've got some material that has actually was like between the years of Oz Comics and the years of Cyclone. They're really early stuff. And I may repackage some of that just as a little special sort of like 40th anniversary thing. I don't know, but to be honest, I really want to just do new stuff. The older stuff will get redone at some point, I'm sure, but to just start repackaging that again, you'd be just saying, okay, well, that's, I mean, I'm a different person 40 years down the path, or 30 years now down the path from there, and you're the same, Bo. I mean, you know what Bo's doing with Nightside now, it's sort of, he's doing the best of what he had in the 80s, but he's then bringing a lot of new ideas into it as well. And
It's
that old
got-
stuff is
got to be more
that'll be fun, but
Yeah, it's got to be more adult. I think that Watchmen changed a lot of us.
mm,
You know, once we read Watchmen, we really had to lift our game, you know. But you can't do these same stories again and again and again. You've got to have something new, and you've got to have, mirror to society, that kind of thing, you know. So like the last one was nostalgia, and this one's fame, and I'm really fucking ripping on fame. You know, it's a nasty thing. Nobody should want to be famous. I've never wanted to be famous. I've wanted my characters to be famous, and I could, hide in the background. You know, I dress like a vampire. I want to be infamous.
yeah, I'm lucky. I live in the Barossa, and everybody's famous here because it's a smallish community. I just recently got re-elected to the council, so I'm the deputy mayor. So most people know who I am. So
yeah, you know who
and-
the Nazis are, don't you?
but they don't really know me as a comic creator here, which is kind of interesting. So
They don't. The people at the
well, they kind of know I did the Phantom, but when it comes up, everybody tells you how much they love the Phantom, and that's great. And then they assume that you did the stuff that was in the newspapers, and I don't set them straight because it doesn't really matter. And when you explain the full story, they're just as impressed. And you go,
Yeah. Well, I did watch a little YouTube clip, I think, of you and Glenn Lumsden, mate, going on a show to talk about.
Yeah, that's hilarious on Steve Vizard.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Now, hey, question, because I did chuckle through it. How nervous were you two, man?
were we?
I didn't think they were nervous.
Oh, I did. That's just me looking at it now. I would have been absolutely packing me britches, mate.
What
we were
the
drunk.
horror-
We'd been getting wasted in the green room. So
What the horror is with that thing is that they were going to do a whole of Steve Vizard on the Phantom in a little while, but the show got axed before that.
yeah, that was a shame. Yeah, Steve
that's
Bedwell was a real fan, and he wanted to do an entire show based on the Phantom. So that was a pity. But we got to hang out with them after the show. Pretty cool. And then we went out and did the town and went to a nightclub where one of the singers on the show was, and they'd reserved a front row seat for us, with a table down. It was really cool. So that was our little night of celebrity, and that was good.
Yeah. No, it would
They
have been
put
cool.
us up in the Como in the luxury suites, which was pretty nice. But
I've never had a night of celebrity.
yeah.
I saw David Bowie once, and it was one of the saddest things you ever seen. He was in the Mansell room, and you had to go down the stairs, like a big windy staircase to this sort of basement. And he was there with some other people, probably, 6 other people, and he was completely inundated with humanity all around him, everyone trying to catch his eye. And he was like this on the table, like that. And I wanted to talk to him too. It's David Bowie. I don't have a clue what to say, but there were like 1,000 people ahead of me, and I just thought, oh no, see, that's dark fame. He couldn't leave that place. He would have had to fight. So they've got to have security guys come in and get him and push people around to get him out of there because he's absolutely trapped. Yeah. And there was that moment with Mary Costas. That wasn't really a night of celebrity. It was about 2.5 hours. You know who Mary Costas is?
No.
Effie.
Oh. From Acropolis Now.
Yeah, Effie. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Hey, I'm sure that's a story for another time, the way you were smirking there, mate.
Yes, I've heard that one. That's,
we might just take it. We might just,
the absolute truth. The absolute truth is I don't know what happened. I forget. I don't.
Well, we'll leave it that way.
It was there. It was lovely. Then I don't know. I woke up. Yeah.
But what's kind of cool, Lee, is that you get to meet all of the people who you sort of grew up loving. I mean, probably for me, the most exciting one was spending an afternoon at Jack Kirby's house with Glenn, and that was pretty cool. But there's no real look there. I guess there's a hierarchy within the comic world, but the really good ones, the people who kind of like that are worth getting to know, they don't treat you any different. And so before you know it, you're friends. And so we were incredibly lucky that when we first sort of started knocking on the Americas doors, that they treated us like one of their own. And very, very soon we were in there, and we were doing it. And I've kept those friendships today, you know, and that's terrific. And so, but I think we all kind of return the favors. So, like, you know, Bo we'd talk about this, Bo, that, you know, you go along to the Oz Comics cons, Oz Comic Con in the early 90s, and everybody was all in it together. And the Yanks who'd come down, you know, guys like Claremont and that, they would just hang out in the bar with the rest of us, and the mug punters, you know, would join us all, and there was no sense of, you know, you don't have a right to be, that sort of thing. And
there was one guy from Marvel who bought us all Lebanese food at the end of a thing once.
Yeah,
and there
was Skip Dietz.
Yes, and it was like 20 people.
And we took him to the Love Machine. And in the Phantom comic, there's these characters wandering through the street, and there's a poster which says "Tonight only Skip Dietz and the Love Machine," you know, playing on. The Love Machine is a rather salacious. It's a place where you can see women who are skilled in acrobatics, put it that way. In King's Cross, yeah.
Had his eyes opened that night after a couple of bloody, you know, like a bit of a meal. We'll take you to the Love Machine, mate. Rock on.
It was pretty cool.
Well, we might leave it there because.
Well, thanks very much, dude. Thank you for
letting
and we got to promote our stuff.
Mate, it's an absolute pleasure, mate, from both of you. I would like to just let everyone know again, now that we're ending the show, you can get Southern Squadron, Dark Nebula, Kickstarter out now, Reverie Comics, Southern Squadron Facebook to go there.
Yeah, we're all over Facebook. I know that Shane's promoting it. Gary Della's promoting it. You're promoting it. So
on Comex, everything there. Yep. And it's going successfully.
DM us and we'll let you know.
Yeah, sweet. And it's going successfully. So if everyone wants to, you know, like see one of you know, like Australia's greatest super teams and super creations.
And just jump on board because we're not finished yet.
Yeah.
You know, we've got more good stuff coming. We've got good ideas coming.
No, well, we want to see it, mate. We want to see it. We want to see your stuff come to fruition too. Southern Squadron Dark and the new stories that you're working on and all that with Dave. It'd be unreal to see that. So we'll wind it down. I'd just like to thank you to our two guests, Dave DeVries and Bo Jardine, who are available. You can reach out to them, say g'day. You know, like as Dave said and Bo said, always happy to have a yarn. I would like to thank Comex, Shane and Carey, for letting us pop on here and say g'day. Have a very Merry Christmas. Keep an eye out on Kickstarters. Keep an eye out on Australian comic books. There's the Comex shop. There's Owner Indie coming back in January. It's Friday night drinking draws. There's a couple of other news shows. The Tuesday Chinwag will be back in early January. And take care. Be good. And
thanks, Lee. See you, Dave.
See you, mate.
See you all later. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
This show is sponsored by the Comex Shop. Check out comex.cx for all things Comex and find out what Comex is all about. We hope you enjoyed the show.